Thank you, everybody. My name is Charles, like you heard. I'm going to be talking to you about how best we can deploy Wi-Fi. I always have this argument that we have enough to make Wi-Fi work, but the process and procedure are some of those things, that actually hamper how Wi-Fi is done. Why am I doing this? I've seen so much that people just, act like Wi-Fi and wired network are the same thing. I believe that Wi-Fi is fresh. Wired network has been there for a long time. So if we want to make Wi-Fi work so that people don't tell us, hey, it's not working, we have to have a different mindset. In fact, change our philosophy of how we integrate Wi-Fi into the wired network. What you can see there is a photographic art. So if anybody, you all have your cameras, you have phones, anything that can take a picture. But how many of us can make a picture look like this? This goes to what we have with the APs. I'm not going to mention the vendors, but we know that any AP can work depending on the environment. But what differentiates how the AP works is how we go about putting the AP in the environment. With this, that is my idea that we have to start thinking like we have to make an art out of how we deploy our Wi-Fi. Going forward, you can see, first you need to say, what am I doing this Wi-Fi for? What do I want to achieve? That is the most important thing. Who needs to be involved? What are the materials that we need to have? We all know how these things play out. But overall, we know that depending on the environment you are in, what you will use is the most important thing. What applies for the school system may not really work for the industrial environment. So these are some of the differentiating factors that we need to understand before we move forward in trying to deploy our Wi-Fi. You have to stick to your design. On my left-hand side, you can see that is the area I'm heavily involved. On the right side, the user experience is totally different. I can tell you this. The AP is supposed to support both sides at the same time, but the application is where the problem comes. People talk about designing for capacity, yes, but how best can you make that work in an environment that is totally divided and you have a security system where the guys on the left side are so concerned about using the application for their business, and the guys on the right-hand side think they can function even if they don't have Wi-Fi. If you sit in your office and you have a laptop connected via wired, you can do whatever you want to do. The only time you need to have your laptop is when you move out of your desk. Honestly, if you are working where I work, you are not supposed to be using your laptop while you are working. So laptop is not really considered a mobile device. You take your laptop, you close it, you go to a meeting office, you open your laptop, you do whatever you want to do. Well, wherever you're sitting, maybe the conference room, you can begin to use the Wi-Fi. But on the left side, you have some of these devices like the PDAs. In my organization, this is really important for the business to move. If that is not there, that is a problem. So those are considered real mobile devices. So design to actually get this work is where the art comes in. It's not different from what we do on a daily basis, but it's a little bit different in terms of how we approach it and who needs to be involved. Having said that, who needs to be at the table? You can argue that anybody should be at the table, but I say, depending on the vertical, that's what drives who needs to be at the table. Who is doing it? Is it 70% vendor? Is it 70% in-house? How these nuances work out is what matters, and that decides who needs to be at the table. From what you can see here, you have the executives, the project managers, the user community, the technical team, the cross-functional team, and the construction team. You can break this down further into however you want to put it. Who is the project manager? You have the business end, you have the IT end. The user community, who are these people? The reason for the Wi-Fi? I don't know, but you have to define that based on where you work and what you want to achieve. Well, I have a little bit of, definitions for this, just from my experience. So the project managers, how much do they know about Wi-Fi? I had a project manager, he came to me, he said, hey, so you said that we are supposed to make sure that we put labels on the AP. What is the reason for that? Tell me, do you really think this project manager will be able to give you schedules and timelines, that will guarantee that you have a good Wi-Fi? I don't think so. So you need to have an IT project manager too, depending on the size of what you're doing. But I think it's important. How much knowledge do they have? How do they communicate this? What terminologies are they using? The cross functions. This has to do with, if you are doing an IT in an environment that is industrial, let me tell you, you need the health and safety department, you need the security, you need anybody and everybody that needs to understand what you're doing. The reason is that you can never have enough people. If this room is in an industrial environment, this room could be subdivided into 10 different areas of, maybe exaggeration, but let's say 3, 4. The guy that owns this area may not really know what obtains with the guy that owns this area. So you need to bring all these people into play before you get anything done. I work in a place with TSA access. I cannot do anything if I don't talk to somebody in the TSA area. So some of these things are things that you need to consider before you start making decisions on how to deploy your Wi-Fi. The executives, depending on the decision, the Wi-Fi could be driven by the business. They say, oh, we have an application that needs to run on Wi-Fi, but what we have right now cannot sustain it. Because of that, we need to refresh what we have. So that is the driver. And if that is the case, somebody on top needs to know about it. And he needs to make a decision. He needs to give you the timeline. The timeline is no longer driven by the project manager, but it has to come from the top. So some of these areas, that is where you need them to come in. Already mentioned before, the user community, how the application plays in the end users, and the reason for the Wi-Fi. The construction team. Yes, we know the constraints from CWDP. If you have taken the class, you know that there are a lot of constraints. It could be architectural, it could be historical, it could be anything. But in the industrial environment, the major constraints that you have are going to be this is more like the hospital environment. How do you get in to get your job done? What training do you need? Who do you talk to? There are certain things that you can't just do. You need someone else to help you out. So you need to involve the construction team. It could be the vendors, it could be the ones in-house. Depending on their expertise, they need to be involved ahead of time. So the reason is that if you don't get this going, when you need them a day before, 1 week before, they say, hey, I don't have time, that is not in my schedule. Well, the technical team, the Wi-Fi engineers, the network professionals. Devin may be the one designing, but if he doesn't know what he's designing, what the environment requires, or what they have in place, and if he's not talking to the people there, I don't know how the design is going to scale at the end of the day. So this needs to be sorted out ahead of time. So some of these people need to be at the beginning of the meeting. What's survey life cycle? I call it a life cycle because it starts and it doesn't end until the project ends. And it doesn't end until the user community accepts the fact that they are happy with what you have done. It's in a state, I call it a state of flux, in the sense that you will continue to make sure you survey the environment until everybody feels that we are in a comfortable place. So I really want to talk about a little bit about environmental areas, the clean spaces, the hazmat spaces, the cold rooms. How do you put AP in a cold room that you cannot even get in? How do you put AP in a clean environment when you are not trained to go in there? How about putting AP in an explosion-proof environment? Who do you need? I'm just going to show you this next slide. So you can see here, post-survey, what tool do you use? If you know anybody that has a tool that is explosion-proof in surveying environment, I haven't seen a complete set yet myself. So what do you do? Guesswork? The last this thing we just did, I can't get into the room. They require Wi-Fi access with my phone. I have to leave my phone outside. So how do I survey the place? What are we going to use? So how do we make sure that Wi-Fi in that room is adequate for what they need it for? So that is a challenge. Some of the requirements that you need to know, you need to have some cold-resistant vest, clean space attires. Some of these things are already available. As you can see on the picture, someone is getting ready to go in and do some work. And how much work can you get done if you're already covered, even your hands? So, and your equipment is not going to go with you in this. You have to have a material space for your equipment to go through. So some of the challenges are here. I have to move fast. Then we know that infrastructure is the key. It could be local, it could be cloud, it could be hybrid. It doesn't matter, but the most important thing is that it should be what works for you at that point in time and what the budget, can afford. Let's go back a little bit. So here we have just a little bit of architecture of how we deploy Wi-Fi behind the firewall. Because for the industrial space, you cannot actually, in fact, the last time it was so bad that the APs had to be deployed behind the firewall. Why the ones for the office environment, you don't really have to worry about poking holes in the firewall. So it was a little bit demanding, but it's just an idea of what it looks like. So let's take a look at when you are installing the AP. Are you doing new installation or are you just refreshing? Your heat map, your floor map, are you looking at them very well? What is the documentation like? Whatever is the case, you must make sure you don't leave any stone unturned. Even if you're going to get in trouble, don't worry about it. Make sure that what you require, if it is from the vendor or the vendor to the customer, that you guys work these things out. It's very, very important. So installation guidelines. These are the ones that I did give to some of the vendors myself. If that is not done behind, you can see how messy it could be. Aruba has one, because we just recently migrated from Cisco to Aruba. So you can see, you can put the stickers on the AP, so then you can have the MAC addresses, and you can get a sheet that will help people install the APs for you. The mounting the APs, the AP you can see there is, I think it's like 5 pounds. If the building goes in flames, I tell you the AP will still be happy in that box. So how do you get into explosion-proof areas? You need an engineer. It will take the engineer, the construction team, for you to actually install anything in an explosion-proof environment is so hard. For the heated areas, for the cold rooms, heated enclosures, for the clean space, this is where it's a problem. Right now in my environment, we have the last AP refresh for that manufacturing area has been since 2009. 2009. What is the reason we haven't been able to do it? It's not because we don't have the budget, but it takes more to get these things done in a clean environment because they are qualified. And if they are qualified, it's so hard. So you really have to, know how to go around these things for you to get some of these things done in a manufacturing environment. I'm really running short of time. You have to test and validate the usual things we do. Don't always think that it's the best standard for you to use. It has to do with what works for your organization, at least within the rules and regulation, within standard base, at least best practice, at least. You have to do the physical walk around to make sure the APs are installed where they are supposed to be. You have to testing. You don't have to avoid disruptive testing. Just make sure the results meet your goals. Then you do the analysis usually. But there are other things that are very important. Once you're done, you need to commission. Get those who were there before. Let them know that this is done. Even if it involves a handshake, you can take it. It doesn't hurt. Then there's some things that we forget, post-budget analysis. Some of these things creep up when you're doing the project. They were not part of the initial budget. But along the line, especially in industrial environment, you hit a spot where you can move further. You need to make adjustments. That's why I said for the vendors, you need to start having contingency plans. So when you do your change orders, and these are some of the areas, that are affected during that process. I did divide this up based on my experience. What percentage contributes to post-budget issues at that point in time? Feedback, this is very important. I don't know how many of us think that we are not designing or deploying these things for ourselves. These are for the end users. Do we always let them contribute? Do we accept their feedback or their criticism? Do we have time for that? This has to be built into it. You need to let them observe it. And how do you do that? You need to use any means. And, weigh the impact. If the user community is not getting back to you, if they are not calling cellular wireless as Wi-Fi, or if they are calling, that they are paying attention. You need to listen. There should be a maturity period for this to happen. And then accept their suggestions. Don't forget that you're just a partnership. You have to close that. You open a hyper section, you need to make sure that at least there's some time for people to talk back to the, we hear a lot about training the users. No, let the users decide how they need to be trained. You can't just say cookie cutter training, this is what we did, this is how, no, let the user suggest to you. Based on that, you cannot design the training. I actually believe that's something that comes up later. So, end user confidence is very important. The user should be able to come back to you based on the feedback, and this is what they see. That is very, very important. Then based on that, you can, begin to think of how to design training moving forward. So documentation is very important. Depending on the organization, what is the documentation system workflow? You should be able to follow that. You should test your backup, your storage, and your restoration. You got to make sure all these things are working. If we can follow this process, it's not exhaustive. Just because of the time constraint, I kind of try to make sure I shrink this thing within time that I have here. But if you have the mindset and the philosophy that making Wi-Fi work is no longer the problem of the AP, it's no longer the problem of the controller, it's no longer the problem, but it's more of strategy, more of process than just the equipment, I believe Wi-Fi will be a better place than it is today. Having said all that, I want to thank you, and if you have any questions, I still have some seconds. Thank you.